meeting is now live.
Thank you, Julie. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Communities Overview Committee. I'm Councillor Cecilia Motley, Chair of the committee. I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Members of the public will be able to hear the audio of the meeting and view the papers shown on the screen. This meeting is being held using remote technology, and should any committee member experience technical difficulties during the meeting, they should immediately contact the designated IT officer on the number they've already been supplied with. Everyone's requested to mute their microphones unless asked to speak. Please only use the chat function to indicate the desire to speak. Do not use it for anything else so that it is clear who is asking to speak. The debate has to be heard by those listening to the audio feed. As chair, I will interpret the council's existing standing orders in light of the requirements of remote participation, with advice from the monitoring officer prior to making a ruling. I will ask members of the committee to confirm their presence and any disclosable pecuniary interest they have in any of the items on the agenda. I will ask everyone that speaks during the meeting, including members of the committee and officers, to introduce themselves each time they speak. This is so those listening know who is speaking. I shall now turn to the items on the agenda. Point 1, apologies for absence. Can the committee officer confirm if there are any apologies and substitutions?
Yes, we've had apologies from Councillor Roger Hughes, no substitution.
Thank you, Julie. Item 2, the roll call and disclosable pecuniary interests. Members are reminded to disclose any pecuniary interest in any matters to be discussed which is not included in the register of interests, and leave the meeting prior to the matter being discussed. I will now read out each member's name and ask them to confirm their presence and confirm if they have any interest to declare. I'm Councillor Cecilia Motley, Chair of this committee. Nick Hignett.
Councillor Nick Hignett, Ray Valley Ward, no pecuniary interests.
Claire Aspinall. Not present, I gather. Ted Clark. Ted, are you here?
Chair, Roy Allcroft, I've just arrived.
Right, Roy, thank you. Are you substituting for Roger Hughes? Roy, Councillor Roy Allcroft?
Yes, go ahead.
Are you substituting for Councillor Roger Hughes?
So it would appear, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I go back to Ted Clark?
Chair, I don't believe Ted Clark is signed in.
Okay, thank you very much. Nigel Hartin.
Yes, present, Chair. Nigel Hartin for Clan Division. No interest to declare.
Thank you. Viv Parry.
Yes, present. I'm Ludlow. My constituency is Ludlow South, and I have no pecuniary interests.
Thank you. Keith Roberts.
Yeah, Councillor Keith Roberts, Radbrook, Shrewsbury, no pecuniary interests.
Thank you. Leslie Winwood.
Hello, Chairman. Yes, Les Winwood from Bridge North, no pecuniary interests.
Thank you. Tina Woodward.
Yes, Chairman, present, and no pecuniary interests.
Thank you very much, everybody. We might go back to Ted Clark as and when he logs on, if he can get through. He was having difficulties earlier, I believe. Right, moving on now to item 3, minutes. I move that the minutes of the Communities Overview Committee held on 24th February 2020, as circulated with the agenda, be signed as a correct record. Could I have a seconder, please?
Happy to second Councillor Tina Woodward.
Thank you, Councillor Woodward. I'll now accept these minutes as a true record unless anyone else indicates differently. I think that we can take that as an acceptance of the minutes. Thank you all. Public question time, item 4. No public questions have been received, I believe. Member question time. One question has been received from Councillor Andy Boddington. Is Councillor Boddington present to put his question?
I am, Cecilia, yes, thank you. There are 2 parts of this question. Firstly, could a breakdown of help given to rough sleepers during the Everyone In initiative during lockdown be provided broken down by market town? The second part is a slightly different tack. What action is the council taking and what action can it take to tackle modern day slavery among people on the streets of Shropshire? The context of this question is that we have people posing as rough sleepers in Ludlow and elsewhere who are clearly part of organised gangs. There is no doubt that they are in slavery roles, in debt, told how to beg. Irrespective of whether these vulnerable people can be classified as rough sleepers, how can we as a council tackle a modern day slavery situation on our doorsteps? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Boddington. I'm actually going to take that question in 2 parts, and I'm going to invite Laura Fisher, who is very kindly going to be, as it were, our starring role today on the item with regards to homelessness and rough sleeping. If she could possibly read the response to that, please, Laura. Thank you.
Of course I can. Yeah. So in answer to question 1 first, Councillor Boddington, and then if you've got any supplementary questions, and then I'll go on to answer 2. So question 1, the Everyone In initiative was a government direction, meaning everyone who was rough sleeping or was at risk of rough sleeping had a duty to be temporarily accommodated. In effect, our normal homeless legislation was paused. Due to this, everyone placed under Everyone In, as well as those to whom we would otherwise have had a duty, all had homeless applications taken. We did not specifically record whether someone was accommodated under Everyone In, as from a homeless perspective, we had a duty to accommodate and so treated all cases in the same manner. Those to whom we have a duty to accommodate has now been permanently expanded, although not to the level of Everyone In, due to the increased risks of some medical conditions and COVID-19. To give some context to the current situation, I can confirm that across Shropshire, as of yesterday, we have 14 verified rough sleepers, with a further 7 we strongly suspect are rough sleeping. Of these, I confirm that 16 are in Shrewsbury, 1 in Whitchurch, 1 in Wem, 1 in Oswestry, 1 in Bridgnorth and 1 in Ludlow. All have been offered accommodation and all have ongoing support from Shropshire Council's rough sleeping team. However, if you would find it useful, I can provide you with information regarding all clients accommodated to date this year and the area, i.e. the closest market town that they are from.
Laura, thank you very much. Councillor Boddington, do you have a supplementary question?
Not a supplementary, rather than thank Laura for her answer. And yes, I would like that breakdown if that's possible.
That's absolutely fine. I'll get that across to you as soon as I can.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you very much, Laura. Could you now respond to the second part of the question?
I can.
Thank you.
Shropshire Council is a statutory partner of the Shropshire Safeguarding Community Partnership, along with West Mercia Police, Shropshire and Telford Clinical Commissioning Group, Shropshire Fire and Rescue Service and the National Probation Service. The partnership have a strategic priority to address the issue of exploitation, which includes modern slavery. The partnership have recognised the importance of developing a detailed and dynamic multi-agency profile of where in Shropshire and upon whom exploitation is taking place, and ensure that there is a robust multi-agency response to exploitation. The partnership recognises that public awareness of and community involvement in tackling exploitation in local communities is vital to this response. The partnership has a dedicated exploitation priority group, which is chaired by the Assistant Director of Children's Services. The group are in the process of developing a targeted strategic business plan to deliver its aims. If a member of the public or elected member has a concern that
we lost her.
It looks like we have momentarily.
Laura, I'm sorry, we lost you at the start of the second paragraph.
Chair, in Laura's absence, would you like me to read out the rest of the question?
It's all right. I have it here. I can do it for you.
No problem.
Okay, so sorry about this, Andy, but we're going on to the second paragraph now. If a member of the public or elected member has a concern that an individual or group of individuals are experiencing modern slavery, they can contact West Mercia Police on 101, or if they think the person is in immediate danger, 999. They can also get help, report a suspicion or seek advice from the Modern Slavery Helpline on 08000 121 700. If the person they are concerned about is a child or an adult who has or may have additional needs for care and support, they should also contact Shropshire Council's first point of contact to highlight their concerns. The numbers are as follows. For children, 0345 678 9021. For adults, 0345 678 9044. We are aware of a group of individuals in Shropshire, as we have had reports from a number of our market towns of them begging on a regular basis. Shropshire Council is working alongside West Mercia Police to fully understand the circumstances of all these individuals and to offer advice and assistance where necessary, and where appropriate, take enforcement action. I'm aware a meeting took place last week with all the key agencies to ensure a joint approach is being taken. Do you have a supplementary to that question to that, Andy?
No, thank you, Chair. Since I wrote the question, I've been in contact with several people. I hear that Detective Sergeant Mark Wilding is leading on coordinating a response. We currently have, we believe, 10 people in one gang, for want of a better word, and some of which I personally believe are in slavery positions, and certainly the gang before, we knew that was the case. And so I think this is something we just need to prioritise, push up the agenda a bit. It's more in the marches now because they're not in the towns, because there's less of a market and there's COVID-19. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Andy. I would now like to move on to one of our substantive items this afternoon, support for people sleeping rough in Shropshire. But we do need Laura Fisher, our Service Manager of Housing and Occupational Therapy, here, because she is going to do a presentation for us. Laura, have you come back?
Chair, I've just had a message from Laura. Let me just open it up completely. She's just trying to get back in at the moment. However, I can state that she doesn't actually have a presentation. I didn't request one from her.
Yeah.
I am back.
You got back, Laura.
I am.
That's great.
And it cut everything off, so apologies for that.
Not at all. I have actually maligned you by saying that you were going to do a presentation when in fact I think you're going to speak to your report, aren't you? But
I
actually,
was, yeah.
Some of the points that Andy has made just previously, I think may very well come up in the discussions later. So please, Laura, would you like to, can I invite you now to introduce yourself and present this item, please? Thank you.
I will do. Thank you ever so much. So my name's Laura Fisher. I'm the Housing Services and Occupational Therapy Service Manager at Shropshire Council. The report that I'm presenting today provides an overview of homelessness in Shropshire generally and a summary of support being provided to those individuals sleeping rough within the county borders. Committee members are asked to note the contents of the report, especially the next steps accommodation and the work plan to safeguard those sleeping rough during winter. So some background on homelessness and temporary accommodation, and this is generally not specific to rough sleepers. So the Housing Options Team workload has increased steadily for approximately 2 years, and this is mainly down to the Homeless Reduction Act in 2017, which was a change to our legislation. Over the last 12 months, we've had 3,369 people presenting to the Council in Housing Need, of which 613 were accommodated and 177 had a full homeless duty accepted. The top 3 reasons for homelessness in Shropshire are relationship breakdown, family eviction and loss of private rented accommodation. As of the start of this month, the number of households in B&B were 127 and the number in temporary accommodation were 101. As of April of this year, as of the financial year 2019-20, the loss of subsidy to Shropshire Council by using B&B and temporary accommodation was just less than £1 million. Looking at a mid-year estimate for 2021, it is looking at already at being £2.2 million. Some background on rough sleeping in general. So rough sleeping is a visible side of homelessness, although it is only a small part of the work that housing services undertake. Shropshire Council was successful in being awarded funding from MHCLG's Rough Sleeper Initiative funding scheme. This meant that for the first time last year, we were able to set up a dedicated rough sleeper team. This consists of 1 coordinator, 3 in-reach outreach workers and a member of staff that works across the temporary accommodation and rough sleeper team. The RSI funding was in part due to a year-on-year increase in the numbers of rough sleepers. Every year we do an annual count. This year that's taking place on the 5th and 6th of November, and those numbers are used by government as a snapshot as to what each individual authority's rough sleeper figures look like. So in 2019 our snapshot was 16. As at the start of this month, we had 22 verified rough sleepers on the streets of Shropshire. 17 of those were in the Shrewsbury area. Of the 22 individuals on the streets, 17 were males and 5 were females. 4 individuals have issues with mental health, 5 with substance misuse, 3 with alcohol, and 8 with a mixture of all 3 of those aspects. Referrals into the rough sleeper team has been steadily increasing, with 80 separate individuals in the last 6 months. So what support is there for rough sleepers? So currently the Shropshire Council Rough Sleeper team operate out of 70 Castle Foregate, which is an 11-bed hostel that we lease from Sevenside. The aim of the hostel is to operate a short-term base for rough sleepers to be housed, in effect an assessment centre where we can determine what support they need to be able to move them on into either temporary accommodation or more permanent accommodation. During the lockdown, Shropshire Council and Shrewsbury Arc worked together in regard to accommodating a number of rough sleepers at the Prince Rupert Hotel in Shrewsbury. This was part of the Everyone In scheme. At the peak of the lockdown, there were 33 individuals housed at the Prince Rupert. However, it's important to note that we have accommodation across the whole of the county, so it wasn't just the Prince Rupert that we used in regard to rough sleepers, that was just where the majority were placed. Shrewsbury Arc and Shropshire Council operate an outreach service 5 days a week. This enables us to be able to go out to reports of rough sleepers across the county to offer advice and assistance, and we aim to go out within the next working day. There is also a weekly operational meeting chaired by both Shropshire Council and Shrewsbury Arc, as well as a monthly managers meeting between agencies. I'm also in the process of setting up a task force forum which will cover homelessness in general, which obviously will also include rough sleeping. Shropshire Council, in partnership with Microsoft, has also developed a homeless app. So alongside our IT team, we've worked using the Microsoft Power App platforms, which is the same as the platform that we're on at the moment, with the aim that our outreach workers can go out and register the information that they find in real time. What this means in reality is instead of taking details down on a piece of paper and waiting for an officer to come back into the office to upload the information, we are able to deal with it there and then, which is much quicker. We're often able to get support out to the person on that day. We also work closely with Shropshire Recovery Partnership, who are commissioned by Shropshire Council. The primary function of the worker within Shropshire Recovery Partnership that is dedicated to rough sleeping is to develop a relationship with the homeless and break down barriers to treatment. They worked quickly with us in regard to lockdown, especially with those that were currently on prescribed medication, to make sure that they were able to continue to access that medication. We also realised quite quickly that there were a number of individuals that were not currently accessing support, and SRP were really helpful in getting those people into their service. Working closely with Shrewsbury Arc and Shropshire Council, SRP ensured staff were able to support the homeless in the Prince Rupert as well as other accommodation. All staff operating in the Prince Rupert were trained in the use of naloxone, a drug that is used to temporarily reverse a drug overdose in order to allow medical treatment and save life. Since the reopening of services, a substance misuse nurse provides a clinic on a weekly basis at the Arc. We also work with the safeguarding team and mental health. So a county-wide service to deal with referrals that involve harm to any person over the age of 18 in which the following criteria is met. The adult has care and support needs, the adult is experiencing or is at risk of experiencing abuse or neglect. As a result of their care and support needs, they are unable to protect themselves against abuse or neglect or the risk of it. The team is committed to promoting positive mental wellbeing, independence and resilience in our community within the framework of the Care Act 2014. We also work extremely closely with Shrewsbury Arc. Shrewsbury Arc are a volunteer-led charity governed by 10 volunteer trustees. They operate a day centre for rough sleepers. However, the services that they actually undertake is endless, whether that be individual support, a listening ear, supporting people, applying for ID, etc, etc, etc. They provide breakfast and lunch every day, shower facilities, emergency clothing, things such as access to transport, computer, printers, assistance with visiting family. As I said before, the list really is endless. The Arc also operate a number of in-house support services, such as a GP clinic in conjunction with the Riverside Medical Practice, Salute, which is therapeutic support service, counselling, and as I've said before, they also have an in-house nurse practitioner from Shropshire Recovery Partnership. They also arrange a number of mindful activities which involve work on the allotment, football with key links in with Shrewsbury Town, boxing and art workshops. As we go into the winter, Shropshire Council and partners work closely to ensure that rough sleepers are supported in the coming winter months. Between November and March, as temperatures start to drop, the council activate what we call cold weather provision. So this is a non-statutory duty that the council has provided for many years. Not every local authority does this. Cold weather provision is whereby we offer accommodation to all rough sleepers, and that offer remains open throughout the winter months. They often refuse it at the beginning, work with us for a little while, and then we'll accept it as time goes on. However, there will also be some that refuse the offer of cold weather provision completely. When we go into something called severe weather emergency provision, this is usually where the temperature is below zero, or similar to the start of this year where we had the floods. We will provide what we call SWEP, severe weather emergency provision. Housing officers will visit all rough sleepers to remind them that this provision is available on the evening that it is available, and is usually staffed by volunteers via housing, partner agencies, the Arc, etc. However, it's important to note that some people will still choose to remain outdoors, and between us and the Arc we will always support them to make sure that they know where they can go to get assistance, but also that they can look after themselves if that's what they choose to do. And so finally, funding. As I've mentioned, we did last year get some additional funding from MHCLG to set up our dedicated rough sleeper team. However, due to the positive outcomes from the Everyone In scheme during COVID, the government has launched what they're calling the Next Steps Accommodation Programme, which is NSAP. The aim of the programme is to accommodate rough sleepers and provide long-term ongoing support. In the first round of funding, Shropshire Council was successful in being awarded £123,500. This is purely revenue funding to allow us to have additional staff up until the end of March. However, we have also requested funding for 2 capital projects. One is a 13-bed hostel in Shrewsbury in partnership with Sevenside, and the other project is in regard to buying 5 one-bed units off the open market in partnership with Star. There is also revenue funding attached to these projects, which will enable us to have specific support workers to work with those that are placed. There is also expected to be additional rounds of the funding via NSAP. And this will mean better outcomes for those vulnerable people we support, as well as a less expensive option for temporary accommodation for the authority. Shropshire Council fully hopes to bid for all rounds of the NSAP funding, and I'm more than happy to keep you updated. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that very much indeed, Laura. Just before I open the discussion up, I just a couple of things that I wondered if you could clear up. Yeah. At the moment, you have there is an 11-bed hostel, yeah, right, in Shrewsbury. and you are hoping to get funding for a 13-bed hostel, yes?
Yes. Yeah.
And does that mean, therefore, that replaces the other hostel, or that is in addition to?
It's in addition to, yes.
And could you just tell me how long is the average stay? Because the word hostel tends to tends very often to give the impression of a very short stay accommodation.
Yeah, we don't have a limit on how long somebody can stay, I think, is the first thing to point out. So the aim of the hostel, so prior to COVID, we had intentions of opening this as a rough sleeper hostel. During COVID, we had to open it as more general temporary accommodation. So we're in a bit of a limbo land at the moment as to transferring over to just simply rough sleepers. But the aim will be that this is where our rough sleepers are able to go, regardless of whether we've got a long-term duty to accommodate or not. And we will be able to get the support and assistance in to assist them. So it might be that they stay for a couple of weeks and are then able to move on. It might be that they stay for a couple of months. It might be that they stay for 6 months. It will be completely down to that individual. Ideally, obviously, we would want them to move on to their own accommodation, but sometimes that is not the best thing for that individual. Mm-hmm. So we will work it on the needs of that individual that we're working with at the time.
Thank you very much for that. And just one quick one before I open it up. The Shropshire Recovery Partnership, I noted that that Shropshire Council commissions the Recovery Partnership. Is this a voluntary organisation, or how is it made up?
I'm not entirely sure of the answer to that, if I'm honest with you. I know that they are not a voluntary organisation. They are a commission service, so we are with you. Jane Randall within the council is the commissioning officer if you needed any further information.
Right, okay, that's helpful. Thanks very much indeed. Now, I will now ask members of the committee to ask their question and comments. And please, will you indicate on the chat function if you wish to speak? And remember that when asked to speak, that you should unmute your microphones, state your name, and make sure you remute on completion. So we're just going to have a look now at the chat function and see who's on it. Oh, nobody yet. So I'm going to allow a free for all now then. Would you like to just, right, thank you very much, Tina. You're first off. Councillor Tina Woodward, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the report before us today. It made interesting reading and quite disturbing in places, to be honest, because obviously we appreciate the team has been working very hard during COVID-19 under quite difficult circumstances, to say the least, because face-to-face has obviously been difficult and reduced, and also you've had to put systems in place. So I can only commend you for that and the team. So thank you there. What I would say is that I'd like more information on the figures that you've produced on page 3 at 3.0, because it's very hard to unpick the figures that you're discussing there. Obviously, when you get to millions and a little bit after that and 1.5 million or 3 million, it starts to get to a point where I almost need the breakdown to understand how funding is being allocated. In other words, how much does it cost to put a homeless person into, say, the Prince Rupert, because I presume there is a cost to that. So if I could have some details just on the costs, it would really help me to get a background of how the figure is arrived at, if that's all right, Laura.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So and please interrupt me if what I'm saying doesn't make sense, because just bear with. Okay. So basically we get approximately £96 back a week from central government for anybody that is placed into a B&B. So if you work on the fact that a placement would be £50 a night, you can see that there's an immediate shortfall. That shortfall is the loss of subsidy that I mention in here. So the numbers in temporary accommodation have been increasing over a number of years, and I'm more than happy to come back to a future meeting and kind of do a specific presentation on that, I think, if that's something that's interesting. But the loss of subsidy mentioned in 3.8, that is the money that we haven't got back from central government. Does that?
Yes.
Yeah. So this year, the reason that that's increased so much is because of the floods and COVID. The number of people that we've had coming through have significantly increased. So pre the floods, sort of this time last year, we'd have between about 60 and 70 households in bed and breakfast at any one time. At our peak during COVID, we had 183. So you can see the impact that the floods and COVID has had, not just on our numbers, but therefore the cost to the local authority of using B&B.
Okay, that makes more sense. So that leads me nicely on to another question. Obviously, the questions posed is when we have a hostel, which we've got one which is 11 bed, but there's another for 13 moving forward through the process. Will it be more cost effective? By the sounds of the figures here, I would assume that it would be to actually have a hostel. But how is that recharged? How does that work through the system?
Okay, so the simple answer is yes, it is cheaper. Paper came to council, I think back in June or July, about this, and actually looking at using section 106 in a different way to purchase different temporary accommodation to make it more cost effective for the local authority. In regards to how it works its way through the system, so anybody that is placed is usually on benefits, not always, because we do have households that work, from a rough sleeper point of view, not. And they would make a claim for universal credit with the housing element or housing benefit. That is the element that we get back as a local authority, but there is like I've said before, a large chunk that we don't get back.
So Laura, a rough sleeper then you wouldn't get anything back, is that correct? Or would you, or you get them to claim, you'd work with them to make claims? Sorry, yeah, I picked that up, thank you. The other thing is, I've had a case here where we've had a rough sleeper and they've had a dog. It's going back a little while now, and that's problematic because very often the homes, when they come along, or temporary accommodation, they can't take a dog. Now that's a significant other to them, and they have a bond. So how does that work, sort of compassionately moving forward with rough sleepers that do have dogs?
I mean, this is partly why we wanted to start taking control of accommodation ourselves. So the 11-bed hostel that I've mentioned, you can have your pets in there. So we've had a couple of rough sleepers in there with dogs. We actually had one with a rather large snake. Anyway, that's a whole different matter. So the idea of the 11-bed hostel was so that people could have their pets with them if they wanted. We're also working with the Dogs Trust, who do fostering service for people who are fleeing domestic abuse, to see whether or not we could work with them in a similar fashion. Not ideal, but significantly better than having to put a dog into kennels, until we're able to obviously move somebody into accommodation where they can take their pet with them.
Yeah, just one follow-up question if I can. It's not quite linked to that, but obviously the Prince Rupert took rough sleepers, and it's clear from this that there were difficulties. Now, does that impact on future businesses actually engaging with the council or the ARC to actually take rough sleepers when these issues occur?
I think it's fair to say that we've always struggled with temporary accommodation, so it is not specifically rough sleepers.
Okay.
There are a number of hotels, B&Bs that we use around the county that we've worked with for a number of years, some pre-unitary. So those relationships are there and they work really well with us. Trying to get others on board is difficult. The Prince Rupert, I can't, yeah, they were just amazing all the way through COVID with how they were supportive towards us and the individuals that were placed there. I think it will always be difficult to accommodate some of the individuals that we have, and it is an ongoing concern of mine, and I suppose is in part why we want to have our own temporary accommodation, where we have the access to, or the ability, sorry, to place people, and we have the choice over whether or not they're able to stay, etc.
Okay, Laura, I'll listen to others because I can see the little queue building up, but thank you. No doubt I'll pop up again. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much indeed for those, Tina and Laura, for your responses. Can we move on to Nick Hignett, please?
Hello, thank you, Chair, and thank you to Laura for a comprehensive report. Very interesting to hear all the details. A couple of questions or points that I just wanted to make, and excuse me for not putting my camera on, but it seems to affect the quality of my signal through this meeting. I was interested to hear about how much interaction and communication takes place regarding monitoring each case. It was nice to know about the monthly meeting between agencies, because that really was my first question as to how much interaction there is between the different agencies. So really I'd change my question to, are you satisfied with the amount of interaction between the agencies at the moment, or would you like to see more communication and cooperation between them? And my second question is really just regarding the very difficult circumstances we're in at the moment and how awkward it is for face-to-face meetings. It sounded to me from your report that Shrewsbury Arc was possibly the answer to one or two cases that I'm aware of where there are people who are looking likely to be made homeless by private landlords, but they have no connection at all with anything to do with the IT, and that's why they come to councillors and other people that they know for help. And it sounds to me as if they could get into Shrewsbury to the Arc, they would be able to get a lot of the support and help that they need at somewhere like that. So I just wondered whether you feel it's very difficult at the moment with face-to-face meetings, or if there still is that option available in extreme circumstances. Thank you.
So taking just the first question about the agencies, I mean, I would say that although we have got the weekly operational meeting and the monthly meeting, actually officers are on and off the phone to each other regularly throughout the day. And that's not just the council and the Arc, that's mental health, that's substance misuse, that's some of the housing associations. And actually, if you just had those meetings, then I would say that that's not enough. I think because of their regular interaction and their regular partnership working, actually they get an awful lot more done than just those conversations at those weekly or monthly meetings. In regard to face-to-face, so I have to be honest and say that I've just got a brilliant team. So all the way through lockdown, I had people that were offering to do face-to-face. So clearly they had PPE and everything that was needed to be doing, but I think they recognised that some of the clients that we work with can't just have support on the phone or can't just have support by email. That's not enough. So, you know, I had people that were working at the Prince Rupert on a daily basis. So we staffed that 7 days a week between us and Shrewsbury Arc, you know, and people absolutely went above and beyond. When you had other people kind of, you know, running away from any kind of face-to-face contact, I had members of my team sticking their hands up asking if they could do more because they realised that that's what was needed. What I would say about support from the Arc, so the Arc are absolutely brilliant, but they are specifically in relation to rough sleepers. So if as a councillor you have somebody come through that is in housing need, your first port of call would be housing options. So I accept that if somebody hasn't got access to the internet at the moment, it's a little bit more difficult, but we do have a direct line via the 0345. If you went into the Shropshire local, if you emailed across, then we would pick that case up and we would have that conversation with someone. The Arc is specifically rough sleepers, whereas the housing options team is homelessness in general.
Yeah, I understand that. No supplementary questions. Nice to hear we've got such a good team. Thank you.
Okay.
Laura, just before I call the next speaker, I just wanted to just ask you a slightly random question, if you like. Unfortunately, we were hoping to have representatives from the Arc here today, but there was a muddle up about the date and therefore they couldn't come. And I appreciate the fact very much that the Arc is very much Shrewsbury orientated, I think I'm right in saying, whereas you are having to deal with homelessness and rough sleepers throughout the county. That's correct, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
And I'm just wondering, obviously the Arc performs many functions and offers a great deal to its clients in Shrewsbury. Do you feel, however, that there are other agencies in other market towns that could be doing more, or that you could build up stronger relationships with, so that you could work with them as closely as you work with the Arc? I'm not asking you to name names. I'm just asking you this as a fairly sort of general question, because I appreciate that you're dealing with really quite complex cases. And do you feel that you have got a handle on all the different agencies that you need to help meet the needs of those people, not just in Shrewsbury, but elsewhere in the county as well?
Okay, so I mean, ideally, we'd love to have a Shrewsbury Arc in every single market town. That would be absolutely ideal, because the support that the individuals who are rough sleeping need is not via the phone, is not turn up at this point at this time. You know, it's as and when they need it. Yeah. So I completely acknowledge that if you are not in Shrewsbury and you do not have access to the Arc, that is a gap. What I would say is, because we do outreach across the county, we try and fill that gap. So if we have reports of anybody rough sleeping, we will go out the next working day, the same day if it comes in first thing in the morning, and we will provide that support to that individual. The Arc also do outreach, although they tend to do it around Shrewsbury Town Centre. They will help us out elsewhere, but they tend to do Shrewsbury Town Centre, and we tend to do the market towns and the suburbs. So I think it's ideally, yes, if money was no object, staffing was no object, it would be absolutely great to have, you know, a Shrewsbury Arc everywhere. You've got to have people that want to do that. You know, we have a statutory responsibility to people. The Arc don't. They choose as individual workers, as volunteers, as trustees, you know, that they want to work in that area of work. And I think, yeah. Does that help?
Yeah, yes, it does. Thanks very much. And just again, without wishing to hog this discussion, because I'm in the chair and I shouldn't be, other agencies in terms of health, you know, the health services, for example, are you satisfied with your interaction with them? And do you feel that there are any areas where potentially people in need may not be having their needs met because there just isn't the capacity to do so, in terms of, I'm thinking of mental health services, health services in general, etc., etc., etc.
So access to GPs can be difficult. Riverside Medical Practice in Shrewsbury has just run a 12-week pilot in regard to registering rough sleepers and doing appointments via Zoom, and that has worked exceptionally well. So we are in the process of working with the Arc and Riverside and the CCG to see whether or not we can expand that, not only for length of time but also across the county with other GP surgeries. I think mental health is the other one that's difficult, and I'm not being flippant when I say this, but if somebody doesn't have a mental health issue before they sleep on the streets, they're definitely going to have one whilst they're sleeping on the streets. And I'm really not being flippant when I say that. So I think sometimes there is confusion between substance misuse and mental health, and actually which is the overriding issue. You know, if someone is drinking or taking too many drugs, actually what impact does that have on their mental health, and vice versa? That said, you know, we are supported by our fellow agencies, but often rough sleeping, it is seen as a housing issue, and it's not. It's much wider than that.
Yeah, well, I had a very interesting discussion with the Arc, and I absolutely got that very strong impression from Emily and Wendy at the Arc, particularly insofar as so many people with who are rough sleeping seem to have really quite complex problems and histories, and it's very difficult to cover all bases.
Yeah, and they're very chaotic. So, you know, asking someone to turn up at an appointment at a certain time just doesn't always work. Yeah. You know, and then, oh, well, they haven't engaged. Well, it's not that they haven't engaged. It was just that day they weren't able to. So, yeah, they are very chaotic individuals. Hence why you need a fairly large staff team, I think, for a very small minority of individuals.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that, Laura. I will now stop hogging this particular show and hand over now to Roy Aldcroft.
Sorry. Yeah. Yes. One of the things you alluded to just then was mental health and homelessness, and alcohol addictions and various other things. And one of the things that concerned us, I think, on one of the health committees was the fact that we have problems getting mental health talking to their health services that are dealing with the addictions.
Mm-hmm.
And that, coupled with the reluctance of GPs to pass on information, must make your job, Laura, very difficult. Taking that on board and then moving out to Shrewsbury, I don't know what the situation is. For instance, I represent Market Drayton East and War, and we're right on the borders here. So what are the liaisons like cross-border as well? Because they must give you some problems.
Yeah, cross-border is interesting because rough sleepers clearly don't keep to a particular border of a county. That's not how they operate. What I would say is it's become a lot easier since the Homeless Reduction Act came in. So in 2017, we had new legislation, and you try and prevent someone's homelessness or relieve someone's homelessness for 56 days. At the start of that investigation, actually local connection isn't looked at. So anybody that comes through the door, you need to advise and assist. Later on, you may well refer them back to the area that they want to be or should be coming from. But initially, whereas before local authorities would be, you're not our area and close the door, legally we're not able to do that anymore. Now, I'm not just saying this, but Shropshire never did that. We would always advise and assist anybody that kind of came through our door. But what we're finding is much better relationships now with some of our bordering local authorities, because actually they have to pick up those individuals and then refer them to us in a timely manner, but after they've done the assessment or decided what support or accommodated or whatever else is needed. So that's certainly improved in the last couple of years.
Do they, when they're crossing over the borders, do the records follow them or not?
No, so we can request so you can request someone's file, obviously, and in fairness, local authorities are really good at sharing files, but no, there is no one system across that would be brilliant, that would be amazing. But no,
seemed kind of logical, but
yeah.
There you go. It's local government, isn't it? Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Roy. Viv Parry.
My problems that I have are to do with people who have alcohol or drug problems, and also people who have had this problem for an awful long time in their lives. They are not always, they start off by being housed by the housing associations, then they're thrown out. And then they fall into a place where they have landlords that will take them on in a caravan or in some sort of room somewhere, who take advantage of them. Then eventually they end up rough sleeping. I've got 3 at the moment just over the river from me that are sleeping in a tent. You know, I mean, the thing is, it's a never-ending thing, but we do have groups in the town, which are the churches, that have tried to help over the years. But last year they do get people take advantage of them. Last year we had a woman arrived from down south who let herself into the Methodist church and was sleeping there, and they couldn't get rid of her. I mean, she was making herself tea and sandwiches and helping herself to all sorts of things, and she was just hiding herself at night. So that they were really worried about the building more than anything else. They tried to help her as much as they could. The main thing is these people would do more, but at the moment, because of COVID, we have a mind at the Methodist Church who help mental health people. But there's an element all the time. We've got at least, I would say, 4 or 5 people in the town who have been drinking since they were quite young. Or taking drugs. If they don't really want to be in a system They want to be trying to manage on their own in a way. And if we could help them in a different sort of way than what we're doing, who do want to be in the system, then that really would help. And it worries me tremendously when I see them roaming about in the streets and people abusing them. You know, once they've got a drink inside them, they're not the same people. They can be very aggressive and they can be abusive to other people, which doesn't help them, I'm afraid. So can we try and get some support for that sort of people, or have you already got that sort of support?
I think so I completely agree with you in all of that. Those kind of individuals concern me as well. I think the difficulty we have is when someone is refusing any help and assistance and support. The best thing that we can do really is make sure that they know where they can go if they change their mind. And actually, I've got a pretty determined team. So, you know, if they know that somebody is in an area and has previously refused support, you know, when they're in that area, they will drop in and just check that that individual is okay, etc., etc. So I'm not sure how much more we can do when people don't want to engage with us, but I completely take on board what you're saying about someone not wanting to be in the system, and I also accept, don't make any bones about it, that sometimes actually the local authority is the barrier, because it's us and us as an authority that they don't want to work with. Right. And that's partly, you know, why I said having a Shrewsbury Arc in every town would be brilliant, because they're seen very differently. You know.
Ludlow's an awful long way away from Shrewsbury.
Absolutely.
If we could have something where they know they could drop in and just have a chat with somebody who's not going to sort of say, oh, well, you're an alcoholic, or you're taking drugs, just to give them that help, or maybe just a meal. But if these people come along and then abuse the people who are trying to help them, it's not very good for them. I mean, they really wanted to help this woman, but when she did that to them, they were frightened that she was going to burn the church down.
Yeah. I mean, I'm quite happy to have a conversation with you maybe outside of this meeting about some of these individuals and see whether there is something that we can do, whether we can support the churches, or, you know, I'm quite happy for one of my outreach workers to come down on a regular basis and do a session, you know, so that people know that they're there on a particular time. You know, either or really, if you want me to, Councillor Parry, shall I contact you?
I'd love to do that, because the Methodist Church are really, really good. They do lots of things in the town. But it's just a case of getting someone that's going to give them the knowledge of what they can do.
I think that's great. If you and Laura can possibly team up together, we might very well get a solution to this. Thanks very much.
Would you send me an email, Laura, please?
I will. Thank you. Yes, no problem.
Can I go on now? Thank you for that, Viv. And Laura, can I go on to Nigel Hartin, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Laura, thank you for your report. Very interesting to hear of the additional things that are in the pipelines in terms of, for example, the additional hostel support and so on that's coming up. What concerns me, I suppose, is the current situation we're in at the moment with COVID and the impact that's having consequentially on the area's economy and the country's economy as a whole. Mean that we're likely to be seeing in the relatively near future a significant increase in those people, for example, who are unemployed, who are potentially therefore then suffering the consequences of that, which can often lead to relationship breakdown, marital breakdown, and so on and so forth. And I'm just wondering whether or not within the additional measures that we've got in place at the moment, any modelling has been done, not only at local level but at national level, to try and give an indication as to where we think we're going to need to be in terms of provision in, say, a year's time, following the impact, the economic impact that's coming down like an express train towards us.
Yeah, so so we are doing quite a lot of work on that at the moment. I think it's quite important to note, I'm sure you'll be aware that actually we've not had any evictions throughout the whole of COVID, and landlords are now giving a 6-month notice. So the numbers that I'm talking about are primarily singles or couples that are coming, you know, they've been sofa surfing, family eviction, that kind of thing. We've had none of that kind of statutory notice eviction, as I would say, and I have got massive concerns about the numbers that we've potentially got coming through. The homeless charities have focused quite heavily on the private rented sector. I think we need to look at the social rented sector as well. You know, there is a responsibility as a social landlord to those individuals that will be struggling because of COVID, that would maybe be served a notice because they are in arrears, and actually, if we know that that is purely down to COVID, you know, we need to be really clear with our social landlord partners as to how we expect them to operate in that way. I mean, I can't give you figures as to, you know, where we think we're going to be. All I can kind of assure you is that we are looking at that. We're looking at the growth projection in regard to, you know, where we've come from. This year's been, I sometimes wonder where people keep coming from, if I'm completely honest with you. You know, and it's scary. I'm working really closely with CAB at the moment in regard to a court desk, in regard to additional support for those with debts. So additional work is going on to try and support people to actually remain in those properties rather than becoming a statistic and being asked to leave.
Yeah, given, just to kind of follow on to that, if I can, Chair, given from what you said there, you know, we're a small rural county, and you know, the impact upon us as a county is going to be significantly less than it will be in other areas of the country. It does concern me from what you say. I get the impression that there hasn't been any national modelling taking place at all as to you know, where we might as a country be the situation we might be faced in the future.
I don't think there has been any specific modelling, not that I've seen. There's lots of talk about it in the sector, and there's lots of numbers being bandied around, but I'm not sure that there has been a specific growth projection country-wise.
Okay, not very encouraging, but thank you, Laura.
Thank you for that question, Nigel. Now, Tina would like another go.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Sorry about this, Laura. on page 8, 11.2, it's how does the private rent incentives work? How do they actually work? And also, there was an aim to deliver 75 new bed spaces. How's that coming along, please?
So the funding only came into play at the start of this month, so I'll be honest, I haven't got any figures for you in regard to the numbers that have been accommodated. The 75 bed spaces are people that we've moved on, so have moved into private rented accommodation or have moved into social rented accommodation. The incentives are primarily, they will be your deposits, your rent in advance, fees, that kind of thing. But what I say to my officers is, if you've secured somebody accommodation and there is something that we can do, something is stopping them move in, but there is something we can do to unblock that, come to me and let's have a discussion, because I have no doubt that there will be things that come along that we haven't thought about. And actually, by having that conversation, we then, you know we can do that for any going forward as well.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. If I might, when you say blockages, sorry, I'm trying to get my head around. What would the normal blockages be? You know, that you come across. Obviously, if it's private renting, sometimes you have to put so much in advance, don't you, and everything else. So other than them being rough sleepers, which is also a blockage from that perspective, sadly. What are the main ones, please?
So something could be if they've got a pet, so we offer to pay a pet deposit, so separate to the normal deposit we would put down on the property. Often it's things as simple as they don't have anything. So they don't have a bed, they don't have bed linen, they don't have curtains, they don't have white goods, they don't have pots and pans. And actually you can't give someone a blank property with nothing in it, but you can't necessarily rent them a furnished property either. So actually some of those incentives might be buying them that basic setup that they need for you know, to enable them to move into that property. So anything. I know that sounds a bit vague, but
no, that's really good to know, because to be honest, you don't, you know, I wouldn't automatically have gone in depth to that sort of like the pots, the pans, you know, that type of thing. But we do have a furniture scheme in Shropshire. Do they help at all?
They do. So if somebody's been in temporary accommodation, what tends to happen is that obviously if they've moved from a property into temporary accommodation, they will go with their furniture, and that's brilliant. If they haven't, we set up a basic package within that temporary accommodation, and then when they move into their permanent accommodation, they take that with them. So we do rely on the furniture schemes heavily. What I would say, though, is that people haven't been donating. So one of the issues of COVID, I mean, we had the furniture schemes, they weren't delivering and whatever else because of face-to-face, which I totally understand. But actually now we're in a position where they don't have the level of furniture and the level of items that actually they had pre-COVID, because people they're not donating. So for every solution you find, there's kind of something behind it that COVID has caused, I think. And so it's working through that often, you know, and it's if you've got to a point, if as a support worker, you've got to a point where you have, you know, worked with an individual and you've got them to a point where they are able to move on, and you have sourced somewhere that is suitable for them and that you know long term will be suitable for them, then it's a case of, right, let's look at absolutely everything we need to do to be able to make sure that that person can move in appropriately.
I've got to be honest, Laura, I'm quite impressed, to be honest, because you know, you've drilled down stuff that obviously COVID is causing real significant problems right the way along for the charities and others, but I hadn't sort of thought, you know, bulk collections not taking place, everything else. So thank you for that, and it's really helpful.
No, okay.
Many thanks for that, Tina, and your responses, Laura. Very helpful. Roy, I think you wanted to come back for a quick one.
Yeah, just a very quick one. Bearing in mind we're signed up to the Armed Forces Covenant, do you keep a record of servicemen that you find on the street, so to speak, or that you're dealing with?
Yeah, we do. So I can't give you that information right now, but as part of our outreach team, they gather quite an extensive amount of information on individuals, and actually they will keep that record going, even if that person disappears for a period of time or is accommodated for a period of time, so that if they kind of pop back up in the system, God forbid, then, you know, we know about them. So, I mean, again, I can provide you with that information separately to hear if that is something that you're interested in.
I am,
yeah,
particularly because I'm just thinking of organisations like the British Legion and the regimental associations and so forth that can be of assistance, and whether they are being, whether they've got enough members to actually volunteer to assist people. Thank you very much.
That's okay. I'll look into that in a little bit more information, and I'll drop you an email post after this meeting.
That's lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Roy. I'm going to, I think, wrap this up now, but just before I do, I just wanted to ask you one more question, Laura, and this is really about what longer term development work is going on to support people sleeping rough, and also to try and reduce costs associated with temporary accommodation, because it is a fact that if we have to put people into bed and breakfast, that, you know, the costs do absolutely spiral, don't they? And so I'm just wondering how much you're able to sit down and do development work, particularly with the experience that you've gained through the coping with the COVID epidemic, to try and ensure that we can actually better support people, but also keep our costs down too.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's working with our partners. So I don't want to put Martin on the spot because I think he's here for the next item, but partners such as STAR. So we work really closely with STAR in regard to the number of units that we have off them for temporary accommodation. They work with another organisation called A Better Tomorrow in regard to supporting people that have got alcohol and drug addictions. They've also done a couple of housing first type options. So as as an ALMO, we are, you know, as a local authority with an ALMO, we are really lucky because we have that ALMO, that partner that we can work with. And we also need to work better with our other housing association partners. So I think I mentioned the 13-bed hostel is actually owned by Sevenside, so that will be a joint project when we get that up and running. Star are looking at a couple of options as well. So it is about that partnership working, I think. It isn't just something that as a local authority we can do because we don't have enough stock, just us. You know, we have to rely on our partners to assist us.
That's very helpful, Laura. Thank you very much indeed. I'm terribly sorry that we are really working you to death this afternoon, but I would like to thank you very much indeed for not just your report, but for having endured so much questioning on it. But I think actually the fact that we had a lot of responses to it does indicate that this is a really serious matter, and one which I feel we need to keep tabs on in this committee. And I think it would be a very sensible move if we could have regular meetings. I'm not saying, you know, every meeting by any manner or means, but I think it would be very helpful if maybe you could come next year, perhaps, and let us know how you get, you know, how things are changing, how things are developing, and what else needs to be done. I think that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, I'd be more happy to do that.
Thank you. Are there any points that you want to clarify at all?
No.
Or comment on?
No.
No, lovely. Thanks very much. So the recommendation we've got before us is to note the contents of the report, especially the next steps accommodation programme and work planned to safeguard those sleeping rough during the winter. So can I have a proposer for that, please?
Tina Woodward. Sorry.
Royalcroft.
Royalcroft, seconder.
I'll second Councillor Tina Woodward.
Thank you very much indeed, both of you. Is everybody happy with that? I take
yes,
that
happy with
as
that.
Good, thank you. I take that as no opposition, so that's absolutely great. We have that now, I think, noted and confirmed. Thank you so much. Can we, without even allowing Laura a chance to have a cup of tea, can we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is Shropshire Home Point, which is a very interesting one, I think, because there's a lot of misunderstanding. The recommendation is to note the report, which I think we've done. Thank you very much, Julie, for putting that up. But I do want to move on to Home Point because I do think that this is an issue which a lot of people find quite confusing because nobody seems to understand the way the banding systems on Home Point work. Just for a start off, so it would be nice to have a good look at Home Point and also to get the views of the experts on this. So therefore, I would like to welcome back Laura, who hasn't even gone yet, Housing and Occupational Therapy Officer. And also to particularly welcome Martin Whiteleg, who I think has been sitting patiently throughout this meeting, if I'm right, who is the Neighbourhoods Manager for Shropshire Towns and Rural Housing, STAR. And Laura, would you like to present the paper?
Yeah, I will do.
Thank you.
No problem. So this report is an overview of Shropshire Home Point with some key statistics detailing need and workload of the team. So recommendations for this report are for committee members to note the contents of the report, but especially in regard to the request to set up a task and finish group to look at the review of the Shropshire allocations policy. So the background to Shropshire Home Point. Shropshire Home Point is a choice-based lettings housing register. This means that people are able to bid for council and housing association properties as opposed to the old style waiting list when you get to the top and then you got allocated a property. Existing tenants of housing associations can also use the scheme if they want to transfer to a different property. So the scheme advertises the majority of social and affordable housing in the county, excluding Telford and Wrekin. It also advertises some private sector properties. Once you are registered, you can make one bid of interest per week. So what that means is for each household that is registered on Shropshire Home Point, they can place one bid per week on one property. So Shropshire Home Point operates as a back office for the social landlords. So the team process the applications, they band the clients, and they also issue the shortlists, but they do not allocate the properties. The properties are allocated by the landlords. The waiting list operates using the allocations policy and different banding options. So if someone is deemed not to be in housing need, they are in bronze banding, with increasing needs being allocated via silver, gold and priority. Those who the council have a duty to accommodate, so are statutorily homeless, are placed in priority banding as the highest banding. Although the allocations policy is agreed by all partners that use Shropshire Home Point, some housing associations do have their own lettings policies in addition to Shropshire Home Point, which I say does confuse matters. So looking at workloads and staffing levels, so the number of households applying for housing via Shropshire Home Point has been steadily increasing. So we're just short of 6,000 people on the housing register. Although if you look at the number of people in bronze banding who technically have not got a housing need is 2,000.
Chair, I think we may have lost Laura again.
Shall we give her a moment or two to fight back?
Yes, to kick the computer.
I'm afraid that the IT is not working brilliantly today. Sorry about this, everybody, but I'm quite keen to let Laura finish.
Celia?
Yes, Ted.
Ah, good. I finally got through. I've had all sorts of difficulties getting anywhere sensible. My apologies. I've been fiddling around with this. I'm going to buy a small camera.
I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Until we can get Laura back, I'm going to ask Martin Whiteleg from Star Housing whether he would like to just give us a little run through Star Housing's work at the moment and how it contributes to the Shropshire Home Point. Martin, welcome. You've sat very patiently there for a long time, but it would be very helpful if we could hear from you now, and then we can finish off with Laura when she manages to get back in, if that's all right.
That's perfectly fine, Chair. Yeah, I mean, Star Housing, as you're aware, we're an Almo. We manage the retained stock of the council. It's around 4,000 properties. They are in the Bridgnorth and Oswestry and surrounding areas. My role is I manage the teams that collect the rent, that let the properties, that deal with the allocations, and indeed they deal with any tenant related issues in respect of behaviour, etc., as well on the estates. So on this particular subject, we pick up the story really where Home Point leaves off, because as Laura's already alluded to, Home Point is a back office system that enables people to register with it and to bid for available properties. We advertise all our available properties, or the ones that become void through tenants leaving or a variety of reasons, moving into residential care, etc., on Shropshire Home Point system. We pay £70 per advert per property that we advertise on there, and we turn over around about just under 10% of stock every year. So between 350 and 400 properties a year are normally advertised on there. Once the system itself produces a bidding list or a short list, it will be listed in form of priority. That is then scrutinised by the lettings officers that we have, and normally the person who has the highest banding on that list, on that short list, will be made an offer of the property. There are exceptions to that, of course. If, for example, they wouldn't fully occupy the property, even though they may have a higher banding, they'll be overlooked. If they don't meet the criteria for the property, sometimes the properties have disabled facilities, level access showers, for example, and if they don't have a need for that type of facility, then again they'll be overlooked, and we'd try and allocate it to the best fit of the person on the list. And we offer them the property, do a viewing with them. It's been somewhat difficult during the lockdown, although we have done some virtual viewings, videoing the properties themselves and showing the videos to potential applicants. And indeed, through the lockdown, we've helped the council to accommodate people who have been made homeless, working with the Housing Options team to try and accommodate those people into properties directly, because we do have the ability to use the council's properties with the HOTS team to do direct lets of properties if there are exceptional circumstances, and clearly the COVID crisis is such an exceptional circumstance. So from that point onwards, it's a matter of offering the property to them. If they take that up, we'll sign them up as a new tenant of the council. If they haven't held a tenancy before, they'll be offered an introductory tenancy, which is a period of 12 months, period, if you like, during which time we'll make sure that they pay their rent, they behave themselves, keep the property clean, etc. So that's a quick wind through the process, and I think I'm going to stop there and basically take any questions that members have got.
Thanks very much, Martin. I think I'm going to put you on hold with the questions just for a moment, because we do now have Laura back again. So if we finish Laura, if we let Laura finish, and then perhaps you won't mind if we take questions from both of you all together, if that's okay. Great. Laura,
Lovely.
Welcome back.
Thank you very much. Please don't think I'm rude. I'm going to keep my video off in the hope that that helps.
That's what I've had to do often. So please feel free.
So I was just talking about the breakdown of the waiting list and the numbers. So of the 257 individuals or households that we've currently got in priority banding, 220 of those are owed a statutory homeless duty. The large majority of the others will probably be in medical priority need. In the last financial year, there were 1,241 applicants rehoused via Shropshire Home Point, which equated to 137 statutory homeless households. Workload within Shropshire Home Point has been increasing during COVID, so it's been an interesting curve, because we had a period of time where actually it really dropped off the work. I think moving house was not people's priorities at the time. And actually, since we've come out of lockdown, it's significantly increased. So the team is small. It only consists of 1 senior and 4.5 full-time equivalent posts. And the workload on average per month, so they probably manage about 500 applications per month, just less than 200 items of correspondence, 1,700 emails, and over 400 phone calls per month. So as a team, they have an awful lot of work coming in on a daily basis. Due to COVID, the number of adverts being issued each week have understandably been have reduced. So back in January, we'd have probably about 55 properties advertised a week. The lowest that we had was a week in May, when we actually only had 13 properties advertised, and we're now kind of, mid-30s, something like that. So we're still not back up to that level of number of properties available to be advertised that we were pre-COVID. The lull in adverts definitely causes frustrations with applicants. We've got more applicants applying for less properties in effect, and they find that understandably frustrating. So moving on to the Shropshire Affordable Housing Allocation Policy and Scheme. So I included this as Appendix 2 with the report. It was developed in 2014 and has not been reviewed in this time. There's some aspects of the policy that are now out of date, and I know that there are other aspects of the policy that the landlords are keen to have changed, as are we. What I would like to request from the scrutiny committee is the setup of a task and finish group as part of the discussion that we would have in regard to the new allocation policy. We would need to do a consultation period with landlords, elected members and the public, and I would welcome anybody that wanted to be part of that task and finish group in regard to developing a new allocation policy. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take any questions.
Laura, thank you very much indeed. Do we have any questions? Fingers on the buzzer, please. I think they're all being a bit slow. Laura, I tell you that I certainly have got a couple of questions. First of all, just explain the relationship, and Martin both, because I still don't quite get this. What is the relationship between Home Point and Star? Because if Star do their own allocations, do any of Home Point's people have to be on both lists?
Okay, I think if I pick that up, Chair, I think we work hand in glove with the council's Home Point team. One can't operate without the other, because in essence, Home Point itself, the choice-based letting scheme for Shropshire, enables us to advertise the properties so people are aware they're available and can actually stick their hand up with their bid and say, I would like to be housed in that property. We then pick up that back office list from the Home Point system and process, and we will then allocate the property and let it to the person with the greatest need who Home Point have identified to us. We couldn't do that without some form of letting system, and the one we use is Home Point.
All right, gotcha. Yeah. Okay, sorry, Laura, did you want to add your two pennyworth to that?
No, I absolutely agree with Martin in that respect.
All right. Forgive me for asking such a very basic question, but it's just that some of my residents get quite confused, even although actually Star Housing doesn't operate in my area. So I'm throwing it in for them, really. Tina, I think you had a question.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I mean, we do have Star Housing in Arveley, and also in Claverley. So, yeah, I'm used to them working with them, and Home Point obviously plays a key role. What I would say is there is confusion locally when it comes to the local lettings policy, because we've got older, what I call council houses that are now part of Star that obviously didn't fall under the same lettings as some of the affordable housing that's developed over recent years. I can see Martin nodding, which is nice. So locally, this is a problem, because when I try and say to people when they apply for things, it's got a local's lettings applied to it. In other words, you'll have to fit our requirements to actually get the housing. It's sort of like, well, why didn't it apply to that one? So I think there is confusion, and I look forward to sort of a new policy moving forward, because I think things are a little outdated, and I would welcome actually being considered for part of that task and finish if we're going to do a group or whatever. Thank you.
Thanks for that very much. Do Martin or Laura want to comment on Tina?
I think from my point of view, there is Star publishes its lettings policy. It's available on our website to everybody to show how we consider the allocation following the shortlisting process through Home Point.
Thank you. Okay, Laura, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think just a quick comment really. There's one of the questions that we get an awful lot is around local lettings policies and local connection, and actually the difference between that. So the local connection is around local connection to Shropshire. A local lettings policy is when the housing association or registered provider has decided that a particular scheme has got a local lettings policy on it. So they sound as though they're the same thing, but they are not. The local lettings policy is a lot narrower, if that's the right word to use, in the people that can apply. Again, I mean, I agree with Tina in regard to you know, things being a little out of date, and some of the housing associations have changed how they do things, and you know, how they allocate and local lettings policies and things like this, which is absolutely why we need to update this allocations policy.
Yes,
yeah,
I'm getting an increasing sense that there is an urgent need to do that, actually, because I think it sounds as though it will make everybody's lives a great deal easier.
Yeah.
And iron out, hopefully, not only iron out complications, also enable our local residents better to understand the way it works, which has got to be a good thing. Thanks very much for that. Viv?
Thank you, Celia. I agree with you completely, because it needs to be ironed out. The biggest majority of people that I speak to will say it was supposed to be for local people, you know, but they've let it go to people that we don't even know from round here. But the main thing that I really wanted to talk about was, I was a little bit surprised when you said that you think that some points of Home Point are confusing, because most of the people that live in Ludlow think it's confusing as well. The ones I talk to anyway. My main issue is to do with disabled people. I get more people ring me because I'm the disabled person for Ludlow, and say, look, they've put me in this house. My car is not in a driveway, it's out on the road, it's down a hill, there aren't any steps to get in and out of, or they'll say to me, they've put me in a flat that I have to go up so many steps and I've got a disability. Or I once got a young couple who had a child that was born with a disability, and the house was in such a terrible condition in the end, it had to be completely knocked through, and they had to move on somewhere else. It took 6 months to get that house right. The drafts and everything, and the way the house was situated, no driveway, nowhere for the disabled car to go. So why do housing associations do that? Why do they put disabled people into properties that just aren't right for them? You know, I mean, eventually they will have to be moved somewhere else. And I've got one woman who was so desperate that in the end she couldn't get up the stairs to go to bed. She had a terrible disability, and she went into private property in the end to get somewhere decent, but she'd been waiting nearly 3.5 years. So, you know, it really needs to be thought about, and I don't think you really think about disabled people enough. Thank you.
Okay, so I mean, I'd be interested to have a look at some of those cases, Councillor Parry, because we gather a significant amount of information on someone's needs. So when someone applies to Home Point, they have the ability to say if they need level access shower, wheelchair accessible, wider doors, etc., parking facility, and they place the bid on the property. So we don't place anybody, and neither do the housing associations place anybody in a property. So somebody will have had to have bid on that property, and they will have also had to have put the information about their needs into an application. So I am concerned that if that is happening, that something's gone wrong, and I would really like to have a look at some specific cases in regard to that, because actually the way that a choice-based letting system works is to totally go against that. You know, the idea is that people are bidding on properties that they are interested in, not just being placed in properties that are deemed to be suitable. I don't know whether you've got any further comment, Martin, as a provider.
Yeah. I mean, I find it surprising, really, because it's a two-stage process. The first one is that normally Home Point would identify if they have a need for level access accommodation. Also, if they do have disabilities, what those disabilities are, we're normally made aware of. And when we look at the allocation, we're all the time looking and saying, is this property going to be suitable for this applicant? Because certainly as far as Star's concerned, and as I say, this is difficult for me to talk about Ludlow because we don't provide accommodation in Ludlow. We are always asking the question, is this tenancy going to be, that we create, going to be sustainable in the longer term? And if that isn't the case, we will seriously question whether or not we should allocate the property to that person, or we say to them, sorry, this house is just not going to meet your needs.
just say that the one lady who ended up not being able to even get in or out of her house, she moved there because her husband was dying, and they needed to get somebody. They were living in a very damp accommodation, and she said if we hadn't have moved in when we did, it was just to get somewhere that wasn't as damp as what we'd had before. But she said, I did say to him at the time, I have a disability myself, that they look more for the husband than for her. Okay. And really, I honestly think maybe people don't say enough sometimes. If they've got another partner that has a disability, they've got a tendency to look for the partner rather for themselves. She is now in private accommodation.
Well, that's a fair point, I suppose, Viv. Roy Allcroft.
There we go. Just a quick question. I've got a nice set of flats on Cheshire Street in Market Drayton. Unfortunately, it's been allocated, or quite a few of the flats have been allocated to, shall we say, not the kind of people you want to live next door to. The police like them all in one place because they can keep an eye on our drug problem. So you can imagine what it's like for normal people, single female people that are living there, would love to move, but of course, how do you score on the system to say, I would like to move to somewhere quieter because my next door neighbour keeps threatening me or makes me frightened or keeps trying to sell me drugs or whatever. How does that score on the system you use to allocate or reallocate accommodation?
So if I take this this question, so again, going back to the comment that I made to Councillor Parry, because individuals are able to bid on properties themselves, they can make those choices. So when the adverts are put in the newsletter, so you can either get that via the post or you can log on to the website and you can have a look. The landlord will put information, so they won't say necessarily the number of the property, but you will certainly have the road name of the property, so you will know where it is. And you could do your own research as an individual bidding on that property as to whether or not that is somewhere that you want to be. What I suppose the landlords don't advertise is, you know, this is a 2-bed house in a very quiet area, but people can do their own research when they're bidding, and that's the idea of the choice-based lettings, is that people are able to make those choices themselves. So they don't have to bid every week if they don't want to, unless they're statutory homeless cases, which are separate and significantly a much well, roughly 250 people out of the 5,500 people are statutory homeless. So you know, there's different rules in regard to that, but if you are someone that has gone onto the register, you know, and you have a housing need and you want to move, you choose where you place your bid every week, so you can do that research as to the place that you want to move to.
Right, but if that individual, say a vulnerable female on her own, living in perfectly good and adequate accommodation, keeps applying, surely you would look at that and say, well, she's in good accommodation, why does she want to move? And would you take into account the fact that she feels, or there's a perceived threat there all the time for her, which is causing her mental health problems? Does that put her on a, you know, give her extra points or anything like that? Because there are people that are suffering this at this very moment in time.
If it may assist Laura just for a second, what we do as landlords is we certainly have the option of actually somebody who's being affected by either abuse or antisocial behaviour. We have the option of transferring them from one property to another internally without going through an allocation process if it is a severe case. What is actually the underlying problem here for Shropshire, as I see it, is there is a severe lack of one-bedroom properties in the county. If you look at the people registered on HomePoint, the stats that Laura prepared for you, there's nearly 6,000 people on the sort of housing register. Over 50% of them are looking for one-bedroom properties. And of course, there is a dearth of one-bedroom properties being built in the county, whether that is social housing or indeed private sector housing. So of course, we have this pent-up need for one-bedroom properties. And certainly from what I've seen of recent developments, the planning applications that I've seen don't seem to have that type of property being built. So we've got a couple of three things at play, really.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that, Chair.
Thank you very much. I don't have anybody else who's put themselves down to ask a question. There are just a few things that I would like to bring up, having heard the questions and the answers and the debate.
Chair, so if I might interrupt a second, I believe Ted Clark wants to speak.
Oh, Ted, good. Ted,
Please.
Where are you?
I'm here somewhere. I don't know.
Oh,
I'm in the
ether and let's hear you, Ted.
Thank you very much. First of all, I must apologise to everybody. I've had awful difficulties trying to get a connection. But my question was basically a very ticklish one relating to allocation of vacant properties in rural areas. And is there, I don't think there is, but is there any way of reconciling the allocation to the highest band, which is the normal way of doing things, with the definite need for somebody who may be on a lower band, but who's got a very strong local connection?
So I think this relates back to the local lettings policies that I discussed earlier. So a lot of schemes now have got a local lettings policy on them. So, you know, whether that's for people who live in a particular village, for example, or work in a village, or, you know, that level of local connection. I think sometimes the difficulties come up when actually it's an older scheme and there isn't a local lettings policy on it. So I think a lot of the rural schemes now have got those local lettings policies first. So in effect, it goes to local residents first. If obviously the scheme is big enough and you know there aren't enough people that apply, then it will cascade out, you know, in regard to Shropshire. But I think some of those older schemes where they don't have those local lettings policies, that's where the difficulty arises. I'm not sure. I'm not a planning. I've not got a planning background, so I'm not sure whether they can retrospectively ask for a local lettings policy on a rural scheme. But I can certainly ask the question and see what I can find out, because I'd be interested to know the answer.
Please, that's helpful. I'm not over hopeful, but it is a very trying issue locally. I'm from Basenhill, which, believe it or not, is separate from Shrewsbury, and there's a couple of sites that do have a local letting allocation scheme being recently built, but there are a number of older ex-council properties where it's just open house, isn't it? And inevitably it's people in higher need that come from outside, which sometimes can cause considerable resentment from local people who want housing.
Yeah.
Thank you anyway for your response.
Thanks very much to you, Ted, for that. I've just as a way of wrapping up this particular item, a few questions. We had a big issue. I represent a rural area. We had a big issue about people living in housing which was much too big for them, because their families had grown up and moved away, and they knew that there were young families who could benefit from moving into their larger property. But somehow the two never seemed to match up. So we had elderly people living in unsuitable properties because they didn't need they didn't need the number of bedrooms, and at the same time we couldn't match them with younger families who did need that. Now, this was a big problem some years ago, and I'm just wondering whether that situation is ameliorated now. So that's one question that I wanted to ask. The other one that I just wanted to ask was about private sector providers. Are they a large feature on the lists, or are there only a few of them? Would it help to encourage more of them to post their private rented properties, or would that just upset the market, as it were? And the final thing, sorry, this is a bit of a wrap up, so it's slightly disparate. The other thing is, do we benchmark our performance in terms of lettings and turnover of housing, etc., and how many people we house against the performance of other local authorities, our statistical neighbours, as they say? So I'm sorry that's a very disparate bundle, but I wonder if both of you could unpick that for me.
If I take the last one first,
Yeah.
Star produces its stats on its performance because, of course, this is stock owned by Shropshire Council, and we benchmark our lettings against a similar group of Almos, and that's produced as housemark data and reported to Star Housing's board and, of course, to the client group and so through to the local authority. So our performance is benchmarked. Now, each individual landlord will, and as you realise, the others in the county are housing associations rather than stock owned by the council. They will benchmark themselves against similar landlords and again produce statistical information. So that's the last part of it answered. Laura, I'll come to you with the middle bit, and I can pick up the first part if you like as well.
Okay. So part two, we'll go backwards, I think. So no, private rented accommodation doesn't feature heavily in the properties that are advertised. We do get them on a fairly regular basis. It would be great if we could get more. There's a piece of work planned going forward with Jane, the new Assistant Director for Homes and Communities, in regard to the private rented sector and actually how we can work better with our private rented landlords in Shropshire. So hopefully, again, you know, if I come back in sort of 6 months' time, that may well be something that I can update you on.
Okay, if I pick up the part about downsizing then, and people under occupying properties, yes, it is a problem. Still a problem with properties owned by Shropshire. There are some quite elderly people occupying some of these properties, and frustratingly, sometimes they are sold under right to buy, despite the fact that the sole occupant will be in their 80s. They have a perfect right to buy them, and the funding is often provided by the family. The situation is with them, we do try and encourage them to downsize, but they have a right to remain in the property under the terms of their tenancy agreement as long as they wish to. And often, you know, I've heard it said that I've lived here for 30 years and I've no desire to move. But then again, we do encourage them, especially if they've reached a point in their lives where they require some adaptations to the property to enable them to live there. That will often be the trigger, and we can then often encourage them to move from, say, a house to a bungalow or something in one of the sheltered schemes, for example, because that'll help them for the foreseeable future. And again, it prevents them having to be supported, etc. So the answer is it's a process we undergo, and most landlords do the same, but often tenants will often refuse and wish to stay where they are.
What I would also just very quickly add is that this links into the comment that Martin made earlier about the lack of one-bed accommodation, because often these individuals, you know, whether they're a single or a couple, will have that one-bedroom need, and actually there just isn't numbers of one bed accommodation in the areas that well, there's not the numbers full stop, but especially in the areas that maybe they want to be. And so if they've always lived in a particular village or a particular town, they may well be happy to downsize, but actually if there isn't that property suitable for them to be able to do that in their local area, they will opt to stay in that larger property.
It's a really good point Laura's making, because often people get the wrong impression about one-bedroom accommodation. They think of a block of flats such as the councillor was describing earlier in Cheshire Street, Market Drayton. Often it's not that. It is this supported accommodation, bungalows, one-bedroom properties, level access for people in these situations. And if those type of properties were being built, then actually I think that it would solve a lot of this issue of people under occupying larger housing and make that available to families.
Yeah, I was going to completely agree with that, because it seems to me that we, and I'm sure that others will agree, that we have a serious shortage of bungalows for elderly people, and it really should be more of a priority for us to build those out. But I do understand the problems that we have in getting bungalows built. But it is just a comment that we seem to be squeezed at that end, and also we seem to be squeezed on the one bedroom accommodation side as well, which is, I think, something to take away from here. Right, I've just got two more quickly, Tina and Viv, quick ones, because I'm conscious that we still need to go through our work programme and decide on how we want to take this forward. So could you do yours quickly, please, Tina?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I know listening to this debate is actually highlighting issues again, which is, to me, it's still down to as well local needs. When we look at the housing needs surveys, then ours here showed that we needed bungalows, we showed we needed that type of accommodation. But I think the government also has an issue because it brought in the bedroom tax, and that meant that obviously if you've got a 2-bedroom you pay more. If you've got the empty space, people don't get allocated them and people don't want to stay in them because they pay more. But what we've got to realise is that even a 2-bedroom house is quite small and people grow out of 1-bedrooms quite quickly. So I think it's quite a complex one, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Tina. Viv, can you be able to give me a quick one now?
Yes, and I think I brought this up before. I have quite a house that could be converted into an upstairs flat, and me use the bottom half. If the council will put some money into something like that, it would be rather nice. You know, I'm sure lots of people would like to have other people in their homes. It would help them with their lives and different things as they get older as well. But if the council could possibly look at a scheme like that, I think you'll find an awful lot of people would do what I would like to do.
Interesting. Thanks for that, Viv. I want to wrap this discussion up, and I want very much to thank our two speakers, Laura and Martin. But before I do, I just want to ask whether they've got anything else that they'd like to comment or contribute before we wrap up.
From me, Chair, no thank you. I do think you've got one of your councillors there, Ted Clark, waving his hand at you, trying to get in. No.
Can't see him. Ted, do you want to come back?
Please, if I may, very
of course you may.
Briefly, Cecilia. I've got a personal concern about one-bed properties, and increasingly with the difficulties with benefits and everything else, there's been an increase in pressure on to provide one bed. I don't believe that they are viable ultimately. I think the minimum that we should be going for is 2-bed. It allows the point that Tina made. I think people expand once they've got into a property. Plus, there should be a need for them to have a visitor who can stay overnight if they need to. I get really concerned about focusing on trying to expand 1-bedroom properties. I don't think in the long term that is a sensible way forward. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Ted. That's put us all in our place, I think. Right, now, there is a suggestion and a recommendation, actually, which I've just got to get up, but my iPad's now gone to sleep. Here we are. That we note the contents of the report, especially the aspect of a task and finish group to look at the review of the Shropshire allocations policy. I think we would be delighted to do that, but I am very conscious of the fact that a task and finish group does take quite a long time to set up, because we have to go out to members who wish to join, and it takes a while for people to respond, and then it's got to be agreed, and then we've got to set it up. My worry is that we may run out of time a bit, because we've got quite a full programme going forward of this committee, and also, regrettably, we're going to have a pre-election period from March, and then the elections in May. So it seems to me that this is something which should be done fairly quickly. And I wonder whether, and I'd just like to have members' views on this, whether instead of doing a task and finish group, and also actually I should consult Daniel on this, because we need to know that we're being legal here. Rather than doing that, could we not set up a working group of this committee, which could actually quite quickly get into action, and hopefully be able to produce a report before we have to go into the close down period before the election. Daniel, would you mind just appraising me whether you feel that that is appropriate, yes, possible, and everything else?
Of course, Lord Chair. It's Daniel Webb here, Overview Scrutiny Officer here at Shropshire Council. My colleague Julie Fowles is in the meeting as well. So, Julie, by all means, like to scream if I'm saying something out of turn here. But this is my understanding of the situation. If you wanted to set up a formal task and finish group, then the formal task and finish group would have to advertise for a fixed period across all members, inviting them to take part in that task and finish group. However, as far as I'm aware, there is nothing stopping this committee from meeting formally or informally in any way, shape or guise that it wishes to. The way I see it is, as long as it reports its work and its findings to the committee at some point in the future, then that meets your requirement, or your desire rather, to be transparent in your work. I'll seek some clarification on that, but I don't. I'm reasonably certain that you are at liberty to set up a working group within your own committee, and you are free to do that immediately.
Okay. Could I just very quickly have views? I don't mind in this instance. If you waggle your hands at me, or just put up the hand sign, I want to know whether you feel that this is a runner or not. Bearing in mind I can't actually see you, so I think we might just have to have a free for all on this.
I can see Ted, Nigel, Vivian, Roy Allcroft all assenting, Nick Hignett. I know Tina has already expressed her desire to be part of this group, so I think that's probably about as comprehensive as you're going to get.
Okay, well, if we say, therefore, that we will set up a working group of this committee, and if we ask you, Daniel, or Julie, to write round to all members of the committee and ask which of them would be interested in doing this, and I'm happy if it's everybody, and I'm happy if it's a sample. As long as we get, it would be good if we could have, say, half a dozen. Would that be an appropriate way of doing it?
I think so, Chair. A nice small group is always best for these sorts of things. It allows a much stronger flow of communication.
And then we could do it with the, we could certainly take evidence, as it were, from people like Martin and from Laura, obviously, and hopefully then we could do a rather speedier piece of work.
Yeah, I understand that would be fine. I mean, one thing I would note, Chair, is perhaps obviously that the person who is most likely to be impacted by this piece of work is Laura. So I think if you sort of allow me the discretion to make sure that this fits around Laura's needs in terms of actually getting this written and not placing an onerous demand on her work time.
I think that's extremely sensible. Thank you very much for Daniel. For that, Daniel. Right. Just going back to the actual recommendations, we say that we note the contents of the report, especially the aspect of a task and finish group, which we have now changed to a working group to look at the review of Shropshire allocations policy. Can I have your agreement to that, please? Daniel, can you make sure that you can see everybody's waving hands, because I can't?
Yeah, I'm seeing general assent there, Chair.
That's lovely, very helpful. Thank you so much. That's absolutely excellent. Thank you so much to our speakers. Laura, you've done a marathon for us this afternoon, and I couldn't be more grateful. And Martin, your contributions have been extremely insightful and helpful as well. Thank you very much indeed. And we can let you go and have a nice cup of tea. And can we move to...
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Cheers, Martin.
Thank you.
Bye, Laura.
Could we move to item 8, the future work programme? And Daniel, could you take us forward on this? Could you introduce yourself and present this item, please?
So, Chair, it's Daniel Webb here, Overview and Screening Officer here once again to introduce this topic. We have a big item coming up in December. We're just trying to confirm the date for it at the moment. I think it's likely to be around the 8th of December, where we're going to be looking at the council's response to the flooding in February 2020. Remember that when that was the most serious problem afflicting Shropshire? I've had several meetings with the officers who are involved in this piece of work, and I think there's a very important piece of work for this committee to carry out to scrutinise our response back in February and to table some what I suspect will be fairly apparent recommendations going forward. We're currently working hard to produce that report for you, and it's very much a cross-agency report as well, so very keen to get that piece of work done. The Performance Management Scrutiny Committee has asked you to have a look at the Climate Change Draft Action Plan and the Quantified Carbon Budget. I think the reason it wants to do this is to make sure that members have sight of it and agree that it meets the objectives of the Council's climate change strategy. As you know, the Council has agreed and declared a climate emergency and agreed a strategic response to this. However, the nature of that response is up for grabs, really. So it would be interesting to bring that. We are down at the moment. We agreed at a previous meeting that we would look at the library strategy in January. I've spoken to the director concerned with that, Jane Trethui, and she has asked, she feels that it would be better to look at this in March when we have far more concrete proposals, although by no means fixed proposals, I'm much stressed. So with the committee's agreement, I will push that back to March 2021. You did last in 2019 looked at community transport. That work never got completed, and then I think that was partly due to really a lack of strategic response in play going forward around the future of public transport. It would be interesting, I think, it's my understanding that there's been quite a bit of work on this going forward around future funding for public and community transport, and I think it would be good to bring this back within the committee environment for actual scrutiny, I think, rather than trying to work with the officers to develop that. And then finally, we have a proposal to look at the draft rural strategy in March, and to look at a framework for engaging communities on this in terms of its consultation. So that's where we are at the moment. Really, I sort of at the moment, the things I'm seeking here are your agreement for this work programme, any changes that you might have, in particular agreement to move the library's meeting to March, and then finally any sort of topics as well that you think we might place on the draft work programme to do some work on to bring to you at the next meeting for approval.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Daniel. That is actually quite a good programme going forward, I have to say. For myself, it seems to me to be sensible to move the library strategy on to March, just because there's no point asking them for evidence when basically they haven't got the evidence to hand. So it does seem to me that it would be much better if we had something really meaty to look at in March, rather than having to wait for stuff. So that seems to be very sensible. The community transport issue, I think I am quite keen to pick up again, and I agree with you, Daniel, that there have been quite a lot of developments in the whole kind of looking at public transport arena. And I know that James Willocks is busy working on all sorts of things, so I think that would be a very good one to do. I'd be happy to take that in January. And equally public transport and the rural strategy, I think it's sensible to look at it in March, because by that time it will have had a chance to actually flap its wings a bit and see how it works. So it'll be a good moment to be scrutinising it. I would be worried about doing it too early, that one. So is everybody happy with the work programme as proposed and the changes as proposed? Wave your hands around.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That's brilliant. So we move on to the date of the next meeting, which was to be the 16th of November, but is now moving on to December. Yes, Daniel, isn't it?
Sorry, Chair. Sorry, I had my microphone on mute. I think Councillor Parry is desperate to add something about the work programme before we move on.
Okay. Viv, your hand.
Just 2 minutes. Will the new government white paper for planning affect rural strategy? Our rural strategy, will it affect us in any way?
The rural strategy encompasses an awful lot more than planning.
Right. No, I didn't think it's just an aspect.
Yeah, it may be a factor, Viv, but yes. I would say that it is not going to knock it off course by any manner or means.
Well, that's good, because I'm very much for climate change and trying to do as much as I can for this area, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think putting the climate change, giving the climate change to the community's overview is a very sensible thing to do, because I think we'll do something with it.
But thank you for that anyway.
No, not at all. That's fine. So is everybody now happy?
Appears to be, Chair. Yeah.
Great. That's great. Thank you very much indeed. So the date of the next meeting, we will wait to hear December the 8th, you think?
I think so, but Julie Files will confirm that as soon as we've got the date confirmed. We're just trying to line up all the officers, because there are quite a lot of people who need to attend that meeting. Of course,
of course. Right, well, I think we've reached the end of our meeting at 4 o'clock on the dot. I don't know how we managed that. Excellent and helpful meeting, I felt. We did overwork Laura, but she didn't seem to mind too much. So can I thank you all very much indeed for your attendance and for your contributions this afternoon. And can I thank Julie and Daniel as well for their support too. See you at the next meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you. Thank you, Cecilia.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.